Welcome back to the Cluster 8 Curriculum Development Series. This video will focus on the designing of the curriculum. Previously, we mentioned that in early childhood context, curriculum is viewed as developing the whole child. It is everything that the child is experiencing. What is the curriculum made up of? It is the learning environment that encompasses responsive engagement between educators, children, and families, and the learning opportunities through the planned and planned experiences. It is the learning environment where educators sensitively paced routines and transitions, and teaching intentions that are deliberate and purposeful. And on top of those, you will find evidence of learning outcomes presented through play and shared by educators through documentation. However, what you need to also know is that curriculum decisions are driven by the service philosophy. The Education and Care Services National Regulations, Regulation 55, and National Quality Standards Element 7.2.1 requires every approved service to have in place a service philosophy. A philosophy typically reflects the underpinning values and beliefs of stakeholders, who are the approved providers, educators, families, and children. A philosophy reflects the values of the early childhood and care service, which in turn determines the kind of environment that is created. To know more about curriculum design, please refer to your prescribed textbook Frameworks for Learning and Development in Essential Resources Part 2 and from page 17 to 25. Referring to the Early Years Learning Framework Planning Cycle, once information on children has been gathered and analyzed, educators can move on to the next phase of the planning cycle, plan, act, or do. You will get the opportunity to demonstrate this in the practical task of your placement block. Let's take a closer look. What might documentation look like? Much like framework, there is no one specific way to document your curriculum or program. It can be broken down into learning outcomes. It can work around goals, exploratory areas, developmental areas, daily reflections. Regardless of the way you present your program, there are considerations that you need to address. You need to consider to what extent does your planning process ensures that you incorporate the vision, principles, and practices of the Early Years Learning Framework? How can families contribute to planning process? How are you listening to the child's voice? In planning the program, do you use a holistic approach to children's learning? Is the program responsive to what is happening in children's lives and expanding and building on their learning outside the setting? Does your planning encompass all the interactions, activities, routines, and events of the service? Does the written plan show how educators will differentiate the program or experiences for individuals or groups of children? After you consider all these questions in your planning, you will then put all the information that you have gathered and planned into practice. Professional knowledge. When implementing programs for young children, educators bring together all their professional knowledge, which includes what they know and understand about play as learning, how children learn and develop, how to facilitate and support learning and development, enabling environments, the importance of developing positive, trusting relationships with children and their families, the Early Years Learning Framework. And remember, this all comes with experience. It doesn't happen overnight. To learn more about professional knowledge required when planning the curriculum, please read from page 410 of your textbook, frameworks for learning and development. So what kind of experiences could you set up for children? Learning experiences are activities that help children achieve their goals and learning outcomes of the curriculum. Can you think of a learning experience that you recently set up for a child? Pause this video now and write down that experience on a piece of paper. Okay, so with the experience that you have written down, consider these questions. Does the experience promote and encourage agency? Does your experience provide opportunities to stimulate holistic learning and development? Does your experience reflect the child's interests, behavior, play preferences, and strengths? Does your experience use appropriate resources, including natural materials? Does your experience support active exploration? Does your experience provide a wide choice of learning resources? Does your experience support learning? Does your experience challenge and extend learning? Does your experience encourage sustained interaction? Does your experience support educators as active role models? Does your experience support predictable and flexible routines? Does your experience support the growing needs for independence? You may not have all the boxes ticked, but the more boxes you can tick in each experience, the more you'll see your environment as the third teacher. Refer to page 81 of the Frameworks of Learning and Development textbook to find out more about the environment as the third teacher. Making modifications in the program in your program plan, you will need to record all the extensions and modifications made during the period, which include added or removed resources due to changes of interest or input from educators, children, and families, spontaneous learning or teaching experiences, modified to the routine to fit impromptu experiences or events. We have now come to the end of this episode of Cluster 8 series. I hope you have benefited from this teaching video and look forward to see you in the next episode where we will reflect on and review the curriculum. Until then, thank you.